Okay, hi everyone, and salam sejahtera. Okay, thank you very much for joining the MSPT Coffee Talk, and I believe everyone with a mug of coffee, as I am now. Okay, just to highlight to the members that this is the first event from the Malaysian Society of Pharmaceutical Technology, MSPT, for the year 2021. So as we know, coronavirus disease 2019 has been a pandemic disease where the termination is not yet predictable. Although the outbreak has stimulated research, but to date, there are no antiviral therapeutics available that specifically targeting the virus. On the other hand, natural compounds with a great diversity of chemical structures may provide an alternative approach to discover new antivirals. In fact, Malaysia is part of the Sunderland Biodiversity Hotspot and ranked 12th globally in terms of its National Biodiversity Index. So that's bringing it to our topic today, so which is natural products for anti-severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. So today we have Prof. Habibah A. Wahab, or we often address her as Prof. Beep, to share with us her research on natural products and COVID-19. Hi, Prof. How are you?
Hi, Tiger. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Prof. I think it's a great pleasure having you here with us to share your research on COVID-19 and then the natural products. So I'm pretty sure like a Prof is a person that doesn't need an introduction. Everyone knows you. But then somehow I'm obligated to say a few words about you. Okay, Prof Beep is a Dean of School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, University Science Malaysia, and her research focuses mostly on computer-aided drug design and plant-based drug discovery. And before I pass the session to Prof, there is one housekeeping announcement from me. So please post your questions at the comment box, and then we will discuss them at the end of the sessions. So Prof, the webinar is yours.
Thank you, Tiger. Thank you for a very kind introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer, Malaysian Society of Pharmaceutical Technology, especially Dr. Tiger Rajan, who is hosting us today for this MSPT Coffee Talk. Right. So since this is a coffee talk, I didn't have a coffee. Maybe Tiger should buy me later, right? I would like to try to make this talk lighter. So just giving you some current information on COVID-19, especially on topics related to us, yeah, the treatment and prevention of the disease. And at the end of my talk, especially Dr. Tiger. Right. My talk, I will talk about the natural products which have been used in COVID-19 treatment. Right. So I just, want to get everybody's attention on this particular articles last year in September 2019, where Mr. Laurie Garrett is actually complaining that, the world actually knows that an apocalyptic pandemic is coming, but nobody is interested in doing anything of it. Okay? Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know we are facing such a difficult and unusual time with this pandemic. Although most of us are taken by surprise of this disruption of our normal daily routines, actually some of us already know that the pandemic is coming, actually, big pandemic is coming, right? So just like Mr. Garrett said that we all know, right? We know since 1989, okay, where Dr. Joshua Lederberg, a Nobel laureate, who was also the president of Rockefeller University in New York, actually were very, very concerned about what is going on in the world at that particular time. So he actually organized a conference where he take all the virologists all around the world to convene and actually express and discuss about the conversion of factors that could set the stage for new epidemics. Okay, so even at that time, scientists already know that because of the population growth, and most people live in crowded sectors, and we also have airplane travel, that people travel like Asia, everybody can fly. So these are all the factors that can spread a virus even before anyone are aware that they are carrying it, and compounded with the fact that we are also facing with climate change and environmental and ecological changes. So this is a very huge conference that trigger concern to National Academy of Science, Institute of Medicine, which create a paper. They actually made a paper which drew attentions of Mr. Bill Clinton, who was the president at that time. So President Bill Clinton actually issues a directive on inclusion of emerging infectious disease as a national security threat, okay, in 1996. So as early as that, we were actually preparing for the coming of the pandemic, okay. All right. So since then, from time to time, we were reminded about pandemic which are looming at that time. So in 2009, the economists are talking about pandemic threat. Okay, CNN keep on warning about global pandemic and keep on accusing the world that we are not ready, right? And it's true enough that. We are not that ready when actually the current pandemics happens. Okay, it's interesting also that even in 2019, right, Bill Gates also predicted global flu pandemics originating from China. Okay, so he predicted within 6 months this flu pandemic will kill about 33 million people worldwide in 6 months. Okay, so I thought it was a scary thing, if it does happen, right? If its prediction was true, but his prediction was not very far from true, because not long after that, a year later, we actually got this COVID-19 pandemic. Okay? Right, and we have been in this pandemic for 1 year already now. Okay. Fortunately, it didn't kill 33 million people in the 6 months. Okay, but I would like to highlight about COVID-19. So this is a new infective disease that is affecting humankind. And this slide is actually a brief timeline of the disease. What happened was in the end of 2019, China alerted WHO of the pneumonia-like cases. Okay, and then 2 days afterward, WHO announced that the novel coronavirus is actually the causative agent of this pneumonia-like cases. Okay, so the virus was not only highly contagious, okay, but can be fatal. And the first test was announced on January 11, 2020. Okay? And the next day, China publicly released the genetic sequence of this novel coronavirus. And on February 11, WHO named this disease as COVID-19 disease. Okay, so we are here within 1 month after that. Okay, the first death outside of China was announced in the Philippines, and this follows by many countries around the world, including Egypt, Malaysia, US, and many more that reported death due to COVID-19. Okay, so in March 2020, around 100 countries reported the cases, prompting WHO to declare it as a world pandemic on March 11, 2020. Following the pandemic, most countries actually imposed lockdown, including our country, Malaysia. And within 1 month, in April 11, 1 million people actually, 1 million people succumbed to this death. Okay, so within 1 month, we already got 1 million deaths reported worldwide. Okay, so this situation could have been worse, okay? But thanks to WHO strategic preparedness and response plan, this fatality can be somewhat reduced. And today, slightly more than a year since we know the existence of coronavirus, this is the situation, right? Today, actually. So, as of 5:38 a.m. our time today. So this is a situation of coronavirus which has been reported to WHO. So you can see that the world has witnessed close to 94 million cases, almost 100 million cases, okay? And including more than 2 million deaths, okay, reported to WHO. Okay, and Malaysia also affected badly with this pandemic. We are just a small country with just around 30 million of population. But as early as the latest at 5 a.m. this morning, Malaysia has reported around 158,434 cases, confirmed cases, with 601 deaths. So it's quite scary, actually, this disease. This is, quite unprecedented in our lifetime, at least in my lifetime, okay? Right. But certainly COVID-19 is not a new disease, not the only pandemic that humankind has been inflicted, okay? So here are some other major pandemics that have occurred during, over time. I'm not going to talk about all these ancient plagues and so on, but just to highlight that we have a Russian flu, Spanish flu, Asian flu, Hong Kong flu that have killed millions of people. Okay? But despite the persistence of disease and pandemics throughout the history, there are one consistent trend over the time, that is a gradual reduction in death rate. Okay, so healthcare improvement and understanding of factors that incubate pandemics have been powerful tools in mitigating this impact. Okay, the pandemic impact. Scientists usually use basic measure to track the infectiousness of a disease. This is what called R0. Okay. This number tells us how many susceptible people on average each sick person will turn to infect. Okay, right. So just highlighted here is actually measles. Okay, measles can infect one sick measles patient can infect another 16 people. Okay, so on average, actually, it kills 12 to 18 people in an unvaccinated population. So imagine if we live in a time where there is no vaccine and there is a pandemic of measles. So I cannot even imagine what is going to happen. But fortunately, with vaccination, measles infection can actually be curbed. Okay, the spread of the infection can be curbed. Okay, so as more and more people are immune to a disease, the less likely it is to proliferate, making vaccinations critical to prevent the resurgence of known and treatable disease. So it's really hard to calculate or forecast the true impact of COVID-19. Okay, right? As the outbreak is still ongoing, but researchers are still learning about the coronavirus. At the moment, the R0 of COVID-19 is 2.5, so it's still very infectious. Okay. Right. However, one thing for certain is vaccination for COVID-19 is so important to curb this virus. You remember what Bill Gates predicted in 6 months, if nothing is done, when the flu pandemic happens from China, there will be like 33 million people died. But thankfully, with all the measures that WHO and all governments around the world have taken, right? The number of deaths up to 1 year is about 2 million, okay? Right? And the countries around the world now are starting to deliver vaccine shots to the populations, okay, to their people, okay? So this map is actually a tracker how many vaccines have been delivered to the populations. So these are the countries that have started immunization programs for their citizens include United States, UK, China, Russia, Canada, India, Mexico, and Indonesia. We'll be asking when is Malaysia going to have a vaccination, eh? Right? And why is Indonesia is ahead of us? Indonesia actually is a place where the Sinovac actually carry out their COVID-19 vaccine trial. So they got the privilege of getting the procurement of COVID-19 vaccine through Sinovac. Okay, but for Malaysia, worry not. Okay. Our country too is preparing to launch immunization program, which should start sometimes, in this first quarter of this year. Okay, so according to the age market, Malaysia is spending around 504 million to buy enough shots to cover 26.5 million people, or about 80% of its population. Right. So I put this man whom I greatly admire. So when he became the Minister of Science, while the Ministry of Health are actually battling how to contain the disease, right? Mr. Khairi Jamaluddin actually took a proactive measure for Ministry of Science to champion this vaccine with Ministry of Health. Okay, right. So, according to him, Malaysia is still among earliest to receive COVID-19 vaccine in this region, beside Indonesia, right? So, we are still among the earliest, okay? So, this was last week. He tweeted that the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Authority has given conditional registration for Pfizer vaccine. So, it's a good hope for all Malaysians that something that we are waiting for, this COVID-19, right? But I just want to highlight here, Pfizer vaccines are not the only vaccines available to the world. There are many other, right? So here you can see that the table highlights the available vaccines for COVID-19 and its developmental status. Okay, but basically Moderna also already got approval. Okay, so Pfizer vaccine is actually in collaboration with BioNTech. So this is a biotech company in Germany. So there were many vaccines available for COVID-19. So it's something which is good. For the populations, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, because there was no drug available, okay, no vaccine at that time, there have been many drug repurposing research to search for the current drug that might work for COVID-19. Okay, so the question is, are there any drugs right now that work for COVID-19? Okay? Right, at the beginning, repurposed drugs which are successful include hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, as well as anti-HIV, various anti-ritonavir, and so on. Okay, but FDA only approved treatment for COVID-19. The first drug that has been approved is actually remdesivir. Okay, so this was approved in October 22 last year. So these are for some people who wanted to know, while vaccine is preventing, drugs should be able to treat. While vaccine is started to roll, so we want to know also whether there is any drugs available on the market. So yeah, the good news is there is one. Okay. Although people use hydroxychloroquine at the early stage of pandemic, eventually WHO discontinues hydroxychloroquine as well as lopinavir and ritonavir. This was the anti-HIV which I mentioned early on, which has been repurposed for COVID-19. Okay, so they discontinued this from upon recommendation from the Solidarity Trials International Steering Committee, right? Not only that, the steering committee found that the treatment using hydrochloroquine and lopinavir or ritonavir produced little or no reduction in the mortality or hospitalized COVID-19 patients when compared to standard of care. Okay? They also concerned about side effects of post drugs that has been used. Okay? So these are some news about the drugs, and for your information, there are also other drug candidates for COVID-19 infection, which are in various stages of clinical trials. Okay, most of them still are repurposed drugs. When I mention about repurposed drugs, these are the drugs which has been previously approved for some other disease. Okay, and now they actually study whether the same drug can also be used as antiviral for COVID-19, for example. Okay, so most drugs in the table is actually repurposed drug, but there are two drugs which are new drug candidate. These are lanzilumab and CD24FC. Okay, so these are the new drug. Well, the rest are repurposed drugs. Okay? Right. If you would like to know more about current research on COVID-19 drug development, so most drugs are still under development, so you could visit this COVID pipeline at acmedsci.ac.uk. So it listed down all the preclinical drug developments for COVID-19. Okay. Right. So now I come to the topics that's given by Tiger to me. So to talk about the natural products for anti-SARS-CoV-19. Okay? So Dr. Tiger actually bring up a good point that Malaysia is sitting on the Sunderland, and we're the only country which has the whole of the country has a mega biodiversity, in the Sunderlands. Other countries like Indonesia, some part of Indonesia are not having the major biodiversity. Some part of Thailand are not having the major biodiversity. We are the only country which actually has the whole country have the biodiversity. So would a country like Malaysia, right, can benefit from rich biodiversity and traditional medicine knowledge to search for treatment of COVID-19 from natural product? Would country like us or like Indonesia, right, or Thailand, yeah? Right? Mentioned early on, the drugs were actually synthetic or biologic. So is there any hopes for natural products? Right. Right. Natural products have been a source of drugs actually. So the contribution of natural products for drug development has extensively been documented. They still hold out the best options for finding novel agents or active templates. Okay? The structural diversity and biological activity of natural products make them the most valuable sources of drugs and drug leads. In fact, more than 1/3 of all the US FDA approved therapeutic agents over the past 20 years are derived or inspired from natural products. Okay, and more than 50% of the developed small molecules are actually from natural products. So this has been documented year in and year out by Newman and Craig. So every year you can get his updates on how many drugs actually in the market come from natural products. Okay. But I want to highlight the table here. So the table next to the charts are examples of representative of drug discovered from natural products. Okay, these are taken from expert opinion on drug discovery in 2019. So the list includes several well-known history-changing drugs such as penicillin, morphine, paclitaxel, and artemisinin. Okay, of my particular interest is actually endogrofolite. So my slide just now, the picture is actually endogrofolite. So these are the leaves of, these are the leaves of Andrographis paniculata. Orang Malaysia panggil hempedu bumi. Okay? Right, so when I started my research or I started working in USM, My faculty, the School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, are very active working on Hempedu Bumi. Okay, right. In fact, one of my earlier research is actually on the docking of andrographolite to renin, HIV protease, and tyrosine enzyme back in 2003. So how I'm glad that this compound has recently completed various clinical trials in United States and Europe on ulcerative colitis. And I just want to tell everybody here that I found it very heartening, very interesting that andrographolite, which come from Hempedu Bumi, okay, either as a molecule itself or compound itself or the plant has been used to treat the infection due to SARS coronavirus 2, okay, so for the COVID-19 disease, right? So, these slides actually review about the therapeutic effects of traditional medicines on COVID-19. So what happened was, in the absence of vaccines and antiviral drugs at the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, the China National Health Commission has released a series of COVID-19 treatment guidelines, which include symptomatic treatment, antiviral treatment, and traditional medicines for treatment of COVID. Okay, so it's very interesting that the government actually put down all the traditional medicines that can be used to treat COVID-19. Okay, so these are the tables next to it. So I cannot pronounce this Chinese compounds. Ji Yanping. So apparently is an andrographolite compounds given as a traditional Chinese medicine to treat COVID. Okay. So it's there. It's already approved by Chinese government. It has been used widely in their populations. And also next door to us, Thailand recently also have approved the use of herbal medicine for COVID-19. And one of it is actually Andrographis paniculata. Okay. Right. For someone who are interested in natural product and at the same time someone who design drugs on the computer, I want to know more about what is the mechanism of actions of andrographolite. Okay, so apparently this andrographolite is working on the protease. Okay, the M protease. I will talk about it later on the design of this natural product. Right. So besides natural product, besides andrographis paniculata, we also learned that Thai also have investigated intensively on other medicinal plants, including Bosenbergia rotunda, right? And they found that the extracts of this Bosenbergia rotunda or B rotunda or temu kunci, okay, pokok temu kunci, actually very active against anti-SARS coronavirus too. Okay, this plant is actually not what I'm trying to say, not has been researched. It has been researched widely. In fact, it has been researched on dengue a lot. Okay, since 2000, early 2000, researchers in University Malaya, headed by Professor Nosad Abdul Rahman, the Deputy Vice Chancellor now, actually studied a lot of this plant on dengue virus. Okay, and apparently this plant is very good in antiviral now. Okay, right. There are a lot of other potential plants for treatment of dengue and severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. This is a review by our colleague in University Kebangsaan, right? So these are some of the plant like Coriace radiate, Glyceria glabra, and Angelica, Cascade, Statis Ingiotica, Alnus japonica. Okay, so these are all the plants that known having bioactivity against SARS coronavirus. Okay. We made small contributions where we also review some of the flavonoids which can be used as anti-SARS-CoV-2. So this flavonoids actually could work at the interface of angiotensin converting enzyme 2 as well as the spike protein. Okay. But we also want to highlight what we are doing in USM. Just very briefly to tell everyone here that our group also have some research on natural product for COVID-19. Okay? What we do is actually we have a database called NADI, right? This NADI has all the information about plants and also have about a structure of 4,000 compounds from Malaysian plants. One of the idea of making this NADI is we are not going to include any plants which are not in Malaysia, because we're not interested to know plants which are in Amazon, for example. And when we actually do the design and suddenly we have to go to Amazon to find the plants, we're not that interested. We only have Malaysian natural products here. Okay? And what we do is actually we
what the key structural ones are. Spike S protein, the most
this is actually the cause of my worry about my computer. You know, I think it's 3 times now it has been hanged on me. You know? Okay, Tiger, you may want to share, but we know this is going to be happening. So I'm sorry about that. So actually, Tiger and you already knew that this is going to happen. Can you hear? Right. So we know that this is going to happen. That my expensive window computer, which I bought, you know, a lot of money on this computer, is going to hang. It happens 3 times just now, right? And now I have to use my what is it? My iPad Pro. So my iPad Pro. So and Tiger is going to share my my slides. Okay, Tiger, can you share the next slide, please? Okay, right. So what we do is actually with NADI, we are going to dock all these compounds that we got from our database in the protease. The reason why we choose the protease because protease actually also part of the replication process of SARS coronavirus 2. Okay. Tiger is okay, right? You can change the next slide, please. Dengar tak? Okay, right. So okay, right. So we choose this because the protease is actually an important protein that can halt the replication of the virus. So what we do is actually we do the virtual screening of our database using AutoDocVina. In typical run, usually people run for 100 runs, but for our case, because we really want to narrow down top active compounds, so we actually screen it using, next slide please. Okay. Next slide, Tiger. So right, okay. So we actually screen our database using AutoDocVina to select the hits. Okay. From here we select the best hit which have better activity than the control peptides in the SARS coronavirus 2 and protease. Okay. Right. So the next slide, please, Tiger. Right. So this is how those very active compounds actually dock into the protease. So all of them actually dock at the active sites, and from this this screening, we chose 20 compounds. Okay, next slide. Right, okay. So all these MSC codes, and these are the interactions of each of the compounds which are active, right, from NADI database with M protease, M protease of COVID, M protease of SARS coronavirus 2. I really have to change this. If we talk about tuberculosis, it's easy, M tuberculosis, but for COVID, right, the disease is COVID-19, but causative agent is actually coronavirus, SARS, severe acute respiratory coronavirus 2. Okay, so I'm just going to use it interchangeably, but I apologize to you if I talk about the work is actually on the virus, not on the disease. Okay. All right. So next slide, Tiger. So these are some examples. I put 8 compounds from this screening, and interestingly, we found compounds from pokok meranti, pokok kapur. In fact, we should go looking for pokok kapur because there are few compounds actually coming from pokok kapur. Right, and also another compound from Garcinia, pokok kandis gajah, also have a very good activity. Right, so next slide, Tiger. Right, we also have a priumutinin, pokok akar kuning. Okay, compound from delima, compound from bunga telang, and compound from belinjau. So these are compounds which are active against M protease of the coronavirus. So what we are going to do is actually later on, we are going to find all these plants and do the isolations, and hopefully to find compounds, whether they are novel or even these compounds, to see whether they can work as inhibitor for the virus. Okay. Right. Next, I pressed the enter, but yeah. But anyway, this work still long way to go. We still have to do some assays to prove that they are active against M protease and the coronavirus. Next slide, please. Okay. Right. But if you are asking me whether how confident are we about our work, because we are using computer to find for new drugs. Okay, so we have a lot of knowledge actually using this type of methods and natural products. Okay, we have done it on influenza, on H5N1, on H1N1, right? So we know that whatever we predicted is actually quite good. In neuromidis, our prediction is about 80% correct. Okay, so these are just examples on our work on H5N1. So is the same concept that we do first. We find the compounds and then we group them according to the plants, and then from the plants we do against the extractions and fractionations, and we test the extract, we test the fractions, and finally we actually isolate the compounds. In fact, from this particular work, we managed to isolate around 12 compounds, and some of the compounds are actually not in our screen. So we are quite confident to apply these methods on our SARS coronavirus. We have done it for dengue too, and we are quite successful in our prediction. Next slide, please. Right, and this work is actually, just to show that from the prediction, we also test it right away to the virus assay, right, to see whether they have activity or not. And most of our predictions actually quite good. Okay, from our sorry, Tiger, next back. Okay, from the first virtual screening that I mentioned, I show you in the Journal of Chemical Information, where we found five plants, right? So we found ferulic acid, which was isolated from mangosteen, right, to be an active compounds. But because we are a modeler, we also take this compound and we design few other molecules. In fact, we designed around 35 more new molecules, derivatives of ferulic acid and vanillin, to find whether or not these molecules have a better activity than the parent drugs. And in fact, we show that our compounds even have better toxicity profiles than oseltamivir, which is the Tamiflu. Okay, next slide, please. So we have done a lot of work on influenza. Most of the prediction are very good. Most of our model, most of our design compounds are very good. Okay, so we are hoping that we could apply all these techniques the same to the coronavirus research. Next slide. All right. Okay. Oh, I'm already at the end of my slide. So I hope the glitch just now doesn't, dampen everybody's spirit in the fights against COVID-19, right? But just a summary of what my talk today. COVID-19 is a new disease. There's still a lot of things to be learned, right? There's still a lot of work to be done to find the vaccine, even to find the treatment and to the drugs, okay? But there are already a few vaccines developed, and Malaysia will benefit it very, very soon, okay? There are also many drugs for COVID-19 in different stages of drug development, okay? And I've also highlighted that Endographis paniculata has been approved as a traditional medicine or the compounds in the treatment for COVID-19. The compound is endographolite. It's been approved by the Chinese government to be given to for treatment of COVID-19, right? So Malaysia too actually can benefit our rich biodiversity and knowledge in traditional medicines to develop potential anti-SARS-CoV-2 treatment. Just want to highlight about endographolite just now, which I forgot maybe to mention. Endographolite was found also from the virtual screening of all these natural compounds from traditional medicine. So it's also from the same methods that we use. Unfortunately, during the COVID, early part of COVID, we didn't work on COVID-19 at that time because we have other projects that we need to close, you need to complete, right? So we have to put our research on COVID-19 at halt, but we are going to resume it inshallah soon. Okay, with that, next slide. Okay, I would like to thank, next slide, Tiger. Right, so I want to take this opportunity really to thank our beloved Prime Minister, our Minister of Health, and especially our Director General of Health, who with all the frontliners actually trying to contain the COVID-19 disease. And as a Dean of School of Pharmacy and as a pharmacist, I would like to urge all the publics to take safety measures during this difficult time. Okay, so hopefully we, everybody will do our part in making sure that we can actually fight this COVID-19 coronavirus. So with that, I thank everybody for listening to my rambling today, my coffee talk rambling, right? So if you have any questions, right? If I can answer, I will try to answer it. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay,
there's a thank you slide.
Oh, there's a thank you slide. Okay, let me. Yeah. Oh, okay. I think thank you very much, Prof. I think that's a very interesting sharing session. Actually, I personally learned a lot from your talk. Actually, there's a few questions from the audience. So the first question, okay, remove. Okay, the first question is from an anonymous person. So he asks, Prof, in your opinion, should people go and find the plant, rebus, and drink the water?
You ask wrong person as well. I mean, we pharmacists are very careful, in our advice for taking medicines, any medicines. Okay, no, I think you have to get a prescription from the doctors. You really have to see the doctors first, get the prescription. Right, for the time being, I don't think Malaysia actually approved the treatment of natural products. Okay, because we're not talking about whether it's active against the virus. Okay, we are also concerned about the safety of people who take it. You know, for pharmacy, right, we want to deliver a drug. It is always delivered in some safe way. For example, we deliver it in tablets, and the tablets, we have to make sure that, you know, if the compounds in the tablet must be safe also for human consumption. So safety is a big issue, right? So I really would like to refrain everybody, you know, not just to take whatever I say today and go and find the plant, repose and drink the water. You know,
Yeah.
don't do that, please. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Prof. I think the in short term, the answer is no.
Yes.
Don't rebus, plant and drink. Okay. The second question is from Dr. Sam Chen. So among those with promising activity in silico, so what are the possible dosage form we can go forward?
Wow, you know, Dr. Sam Chan, you know, we're not really sure the compounds, what is it, physical-chemical characteristic yet. So if actually we know whether if they are, you know, insoluble, for example, then we'll probably contact you or Dr. Tiger to work on nanoparticles for this compound, for example. But there are so many ways. In China now, from I remember, the antiviral is given as injection, right? So we have to really look at maybe Tiger, you as a formulator can also think of formulating andrographolites, you know,
Oh yeah, yes,
to deliver it safely, right? Rather
sure,
than
Prof.
by injection. Yeah.
Sure, Prof. That one we talk 1-to-1 PM to P. Okay, I think there's a third question is from Dr. Wan Iriani. So she asked, like, why country like Thailand and China more open to use a traditional medicine compared to Malaysia? I think that's a very interesting question.
Very difficult question to answer as well,
Yeah.
because you know, Malaysia is not opposed to traditional medicine. We have a KKM, right? Ministry of Health has a traditional and complementary medicine division or something like that. So Malaysia also encourage TCM, traditional and complementary, but I think maybe the products that you know, we submitted to Ministry of Health are not sufficient in terms of the safety. I think people are more worried about the safety issues in traditional medicine. And then maybe the company also not ready so much to develop a higher claim of traditional medicine, because they have to go through a lot of stringent tests, okay, before they get approval. But I think Malaysia is still open. I remember a few years back attending to Ministry of Health conference. They are encouraging people also to look at all this complementary medicine.
Okay, I think thanks, Rob. That's interesting. I think that's a very good answer. I think we should venture more into our natural products. Okay, I think the following question is from the one Mohammed Aizat. So thanks, Prof, for the insightful talk. Just some questions. So how far these bioactive compounds can go for drug development pipeline? Imagine this will cost millions of ringgit. So will there be any future developing such drugs in Malaysia?
Oh, that's another big question.
It is.
You know, everybody knows that to make it, you know, for one drug, from the time we research until the time it reached the market, it's going to cost around $1 billion. All right. You know, I worked before in Ministry of Science. I've been asked in Parliament how many drugs that we make already entered the Ministry of Health hospitals. So, you know, we also have to educate the politicians that if the government give researchers a lot of money, then expectation can be that, you know, one day we could develop such drugs in Malaysia. But you know, I want to tell about the story of zanamivir. Zanamivir was designed and synthesized and tested in Monash University in Australia. All right. So they actually got small funding from their government, the Research Council of Australia, I think zero or something like that, right? So they got small amount of money. What happened was when they got when they got the compound, they actually went to GlaxoSmithKline from the government-funded project through another biotech company. They went to see GSK at that time, asking GSK to take up their compound. But GSK didn't want, because they, the pharmaceutical company wants to take the drug up to a certain level of readiness. Okay, for us, as a researcher, we can only test until maybe animal. If we want to test even animal with a SPF, even animal with a OECD, guideline on preclinical testing, we couldn't afford such experiments. So really, it's quite tough for Malaysia. But I think we can learn from what happens in Monash University. It's actually in Victoria School of Pharmacy as well. So we have to learn from them how they make such thing happens. But there are so many other drugs coming from university. This vaccine also. There are vaccines also coming from University of Oxford, a few other universities. So universities can still play a role, but we hope the government, the public, and everybody in Malaysia actually have some trust in their own scientists. Because, if we have some trust and we are confident that our scientists can go far, inshallah, I think we can go one day. Maybe not me, maybe, but Tiger, he's still very young. He can, bring, develop or, discover new drugs that can one day be marketed. Oh, having said that, I just want to highlight also, it's not that we don't have any drugs in Malaysia. We have a case called calonolide A. So this calonolide A is a very interesting case as well. It was found by an American who are holidaying holidaying or whatever, who actually visited Sarawak. So when they come back, they tested and they found that calonolide A is actually a very good anti-HIV, right? So it's the first non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase for HIV. So they go back to Sarawak and looking for the compound which they couldn't find, and they have to alert the government. They say that, oh, we found one very good drugs from Malaysia, right? And they went to see the plants, the pokok that which they found, the plants, the pokok was actually dah ditebang, dah hilang as tu. So they actually get the Singapore government's help also to identify the plants, okay? So that they found that the plant was bintang grow. So Malaysia has some experience. What happened was the Sarawak government took this effort and they actually wanted to develop further. They created a company. But, again, we must know that making, drug development is not a state, it's not a cheap endeavor. It's very expensive. So I think we should leave it to a big company to develop it further. So that was a good lesson learned from Sarawak, that we could also learn how they actually develop calonolide A. Okay, so well, I think we have a chance maybe in the future. All
thanks,
we need
Prof.
is a little bit more trust and confidence from the public, the government, and everybody.
Yeah, that's true, Prof. I think you got a really good point there. I think one of the things we really need is a science communication. So the public need to trust the scientists, and the discoveries should reach the public. I think then again the science communication come into the view there. I think we hope in future, like what Prof said. So fingers crossed, we will have our own compounds that coming from our lab and go to in the international market.
Inshallah.
Okay, maybe the last question is from the Mushroom Research Center, Malaysia. So, Prof, in your experience, have you researched on mushrooms?
I eat a lot of mushrooms. I love mushrooms. Unfortunately, I don't work on mushroom. Because simply I work mostly in front of the computer first. But I know a lot of friends who work on mushrooms, which I can refer you later. You can PM me, right?
That's good, Prof. Actually, I have a question from myself. Actually, it's regarding this Nadi platform that you have been developing, and you have also been working on it. So, can you please elaborate bit more on the Nadi? Like, is it accessible to everyone, or like, do you have any membership so that we can access to the compounds?
There shouldn't be any membership. It should be freely accessible. But you know what? Just now before the talk, I wanted to access. I can access the front, but I cannot access the database. So, because Nadi was developed quite, in 2005, right? So we didn't really put a lot of resources to maintain Nadi. But should, in a good time, I will talk to because all these COVID things, right? So maybe the computer was off just now, so we couldn't access. But there is no need for username and password. It should be freely available. Should be freely accessible.
Yeah, that's I think that's the interesting one, Prof. So like everyone like throughout Malaysia, so we have access to the compounds that can be easily identified and isolated from the Malaysian plants. I think overall, Prof, thank you very much for such a fruitful session. So again, as I promised you, I will get a coffee soon. And then I think thanks audiences for being with us for an hour now. So with that, we are wrapping the webinar, and then see you guys in the next session. And by then, stay safe, healthy, everyone. See you guys in the future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.